It's coming soon, the hilarious Liar Liar, starring a man who is obsessed with Hunter Biden's hard drive, the deep state, talking sheer shite to Hannity on Fox Entertainment. He lives to push his head right up the backside of former guy. Jim Jordan's past takes him down a corridor of lie. Coming soon, a movie with 0 stars. Try and miss it.
My Republican friends walk away, and Donald Trump said it out loud. Said the part that we've all suspected for a long time, but he said out loud, basically, don't do anything. Don't do anything. Leave me this issue. Let me be able to demagogue on this issue for the remaining of this campaign season, and it maybe, a guy with 4 indictments and 91 felony charges might be able to sneak by and become president again, and I'll do all the things that I didn't do when I was president. And so he said out loud the part that I think we all have known, and that is, you guys don't want to do anything. And I think I'm tired of it. The American people are tired of it. And frankly, it's just sad. And I hope, I'm hoping we're to get to a point when we're serious, not just about this issue, but about a whole bunch of other issues that, quite frankly, have been neglected by this Republican majority that, again, has the worst record of accomplishment of any Congress in history. So anyway, I thank you both. I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I think we've somehow strayed from from what's really going on in these bills. And so, Chairman McClintock, I just was wondering if you could maybe just answer a series of questions. Is it lawful for a U.S. citizen to evade the pursuit of law enforcement?
No.
Is there penalty for a U.S. citizen who
Yes.
evades? Is it lawful for a U.S. citizen to drive under the influence of alcohol?
No.
And are there penalties?
Of course.
What about identity fraud
Same.
and penalties?
Same.
And I think that makes my point that I am just, I fail to see what my colleagues who are raising concerns with these bills, at a minimum, it's equally applying the laws to aliens.
With this difference, and I think the ranking member would hasten to point this out. Under these bills, with respect to illegal immigrants, the deportation, the inadmissibility can be triggered simply by their admitting to the crime. Now, this is not unprecedented, not by a long shot. There are a large series of offenses where this is already applicable to illegal immigrants. For example, an alien can be removed for overstaying his visa, violating his non-immigrant status or condition of entry, smuggling aliens, committing marriage fraud, being a drug user or a drug addict, falsely claiming U.S. citizenship, or engaging in espionage. None of those requires a conviction if there is an admission. And the admission terms are very strict. For 80 years, the Board of Immigration Appeals has provided protections for aliens whose removability and admissibility is based on such an admission. Under the precedent, to be considered an admission, the alien's admission must be explicit, unequivocal, and unqualified. The Department of Homeland Security then bears the burden to show by clear and convincing evidence that the statement meets that requirement for removability purposes. And even then, the immigration judge would have to find that this admission fits within the relevant statutes and the admission is based on reasonable, substantial, and probative evidence. So it's a very high standard, but it's one that is currently lacking in the law and would expedite the removal of those who meet that criteria without going through many, many years of legal process. The irony is this. The Democrats want us to take the word of illegal aliens when they approach a Border Patrol officer as to their name, their identity, their country of origin. We're supposed to take the word for all of that. But the Democrats won't take their word when they admit that they've committed these crimes in the United States. Go figure.
I appreciate that clarification, and these just make sense to me. I mean, these are bills that are common sense bills, And so I appreciate that.
think.
Yeah. And I appreciate that you brought them forward, because I'm assuming that the American public already thinks this is happening. And the fact that it's not is a problem. And so I appreciate that you brought these forward. Did you have something else to add?
I
Or?
was just to say they're common sense unless you are deliberately attempting to admit millions of illegal immigrants into the country. And that appears to be the policy. And I do agree with Mr. McGovern. We are at a loggerheads as a government. Ultimately, this is not going to be fixed with laws that won't be signed and won't be enforced if they are signed. It's going to be fixed by the American people deciding whether they want to continue down this path. This ultimately is in their hands.
I appreciate that. Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Chair, thanks, gentlelady. Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized for questions.
Thank you, and I'd first yield to Mr. McGovern.
Well, I'm just a little confused by that last statement. You say this is not going to be fixed with laws. What the hell are we doing here then?
We are laying the foundation for an administration that will enforce these laws and
The
strengthening
guy
their
who's
hand
been indicted
and
by-
strengthening their
who's been
hand to do
indicted 4
so.
times on 91 felony counts?
I can't foresee the future, but I can
I
tell
mean,
you this.
the guy who just has been forced to pay $85 million for defaming a woman he sexually abused. I mean, that's who you. I mean, come on. I mean, this is. Then wait till then go out and campaign for this guy, and maybe he wins, and then But if law's not going to make any difference, why are we here?
Whoever the Republican and Democratic nominees are, this is going to be the question that the American people are going to have to settle at the ballot box.
I just when you say
We
the
need a
laws don't
Senate-
matter here, then we're here
we need
doing
a
this.
Senate that is
We're
just as
wasting our
devoted-
time, but that's what you think.
We need a Senate that is just as devoted to enforcing our immigration laws as the previous president was, as this House is, and we need a president with the resolve to secure our borders and defend our country, which is something
Well,
we
if
presently lack.
this is an important issue that we need to act now, then I'm just curious how my friends can defend the former president who was saying, do nothing, because we need a campaign issue.
We invite
But,
you,
Mr. Nedlin,
we invite
had
you to join us.
I want to, first of all, a couple of things. First of all, these bills deal with, for the most part, with legal immigrants, not illegal immigrants. Let's get that straight. For the most part, they deal with legal immigrants. Second of all, I was not surprised. I was pleased at his honesty that Mr. McClintock a moment ago said that the whole purpose of these bills is his campaign rhetoric.
I didn't say that.
Oh, yes, you did. He said that we're here to present things to the American public, not to pass laws. I'd also point out,
With all respect,
I'd also
I
point
said
out-
we
I
are laying
have
the
to deal with it.
groundwork
I'd
for an
also-
administration that will actually enforce the laws.
okay, which is another way of saying it's a campaign issue. To lay the groundwork for an administration that will actually enforce the laws, to lay the groundwork for another administration, which is to say these bills are intended solely to be a campaign issue. I'd also point out, Mr. Chairman, or ranking member,
I like the first one better.
it'll be, the former president, Trump, who has said we shouldn't pass any legislation, no matter what it says, on immigration, so that you can have an issue, has been indicted on 91 counts, but he's been convicted of what the judge called rape. He is a convicted rapist. And that is hard to bear for someone who wants to be the next president of the United States.
Well, I appreciate that, and I thank the gentlelady for yielding.
Thank you. I am disappointed, but not really surprised, that House Republicans have chosen to waste more time this week with a package of messaging bills that do pretty much nothing to change the law or the status quo with respect to immigration at our southern border. Despite all their bluster and dramatic visits to the Rio Grande, they've shown time and time again they're not really interested in fixing problems for the American people. They only want to campaign on them. House Republicans have rejected, as Mr. Nadler said, the president's request for supplemental border security funding. House Republicans have rejected serious negotiations and common sense policy solutions to address responsible and effective border management and immigration courts, the root causes of migration, and functioning legal pathways to citizenship. And now, as House Republicans waste time by bringing up these redundant messaging bills, they're rejecting a bipartisan bipartisan immigration bill that Senate Democrats and Republicans and the Biden administration have worked on for months. They're refusing to even consider that bipartisan bill because their party leader, Donald Trump, told them that he wants to campaign on the issue and that fixing some of the problems at the border would be a win for President Biden and therefore bad for the Trump campaign. They said the bipartisan bill is dead on arrival in the House before they even saw the terms of it. And therein lies the problem, doesn't it? Our constituents want us to work together to get wins for the American people. But when one party would rather campaign and complain about problems than solve them, the American people lose. We know the issues at the border require serious solutions, and the bills that House Republicans have brought before us today are not serious, and in fact, add nothing new in terms of solutions at the border. Mr. Nadler, would you agree that by and large, these bills duplicate existing law regarding deportation and who should be excluded?
They do indeed duplicate, as I said in my opening statement, by and large, they duplicate existing law. They worsen due process on some things, but by and large, they completely duplicate existing law.
So am I correct that non-citizens can already be deported if they are convicted of fleeing Border Patrol or committing Social Security fraud?
Absolutely.
And am I also correct that members of Hamas, which the U.S. has rightly already declared a foreign terrorist organization, are already ineligible for admission to the United States?
Yes.
So while these bills provide an opportunity for our colleagues to thump their chests and pretend they're doing something to address border security, they don't really change the status quo at the border at all, do they?
They don't change the status quo at the border at all. They do with respect to some legal immigrants, take away due process rights if they're accused of things like drunk driving or other things. And as I said, because of the laws of various states, someone who is asleep, inebriated in his own car, in his own driveway, under this bill would be deportable.
Okay, so there are actual pre-existing instances that are causing the objections to these bills
Yes.
that we have. Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentlelady. Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
I thank the chairman. I just find it interesting on this DUI issue. We had this debate about whether a car should be able to disable somebody who's driving, whether the dashboard could judge whether somebody should be convicted of a DUI and therefore be stopped by the side of the road. And I offered an amendment a few weeks ago. Only 2 Democrats voted for that, and for due process, if you will, of not disabling somebody's vehicle just because the electronics think the person may be inebriated. But with that said, Mr. McClintock, is there anything said here recently that you think needs to be clarified or elaborated on, or maybe
I think much has been,
countermanded?
but the ranking member just made the point that this is duplicative of existing laws, that people who are convicted of drunk driving are already deportable. That part is true, but again, this also would add an admission of that. But more to the point, in many cases, even when convicted, they're not inadmissible and not deportable. In fact, at least the U.S. Courts of Appeal for the 7th Circuit, 9th Circuit, 11th Circuit, and potentially in the 4th and 10th Circuits have said that Social Security fraud offenses, for example, do not carry immigration consequences. In one case, the 9th Circuit determined an illegal aliens fraud conviction did not carry immigration consequences because it was not a crime involving moral turpitude. This sets this right, clarifies it. If you steal an American Social Security number, we are going to show you the door.
Thank you very much. So they're not duplicative or redundant. There may be some things that are clarified by these.
Well, and again, these are the same criteria that already exist for a wide range of immigration violations, which I just read to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. McClintock. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, Chair. Thanks, the gentleman. The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I share the same frustration as my colleagues up here. It's like, here we go again. A week of Republican futility. This Congress, as we say over and over again, is the least productive Congress since the Depression, and given some of the laws that they keep putting before us, thank heaven for that. And why? Because what we keep seeing in this Rules Committee and on the floor of the House is what I'm trying to figure out, what is it? And it is that there is a constant attempt to foment anger, division, acrimony. They have division, but no vision. Because if they had vision, they'd actually want to try to solve the problems that we have. We don't have an open border. Our ranking member just talked about the numbers, the thousands and thousands and tens of thousands that are incarcerated, that are deported on a regular basis. And Mr. McClintock, in your presentations, you've talked about cartels. These bills have nothing to do with the cartels, but I would assume you would be, given your concern about this, in favor of vital supplemental requests, which we're not going to even hear on the floor, I would imagine. But I'm assuming you would be in favor of 1,000 additional CBP field officers to help staff our ports of entry. I would assume that you'd be in favor of $23.2 million for the DEA so we can do more around fentanyl tracing and enforcement. Another $1.4 billion for our shelter and services program so we could address these things. These are things I think actually make a difference. But none of the bills we're seeing here today actually do this. Instead, as we're hearing, again, there is an effort to actually address the border crisis. I'm not sure I'm in favor of it because we haven't actually seen what it looks like. But we've already seen on the House side that it's being killed. Why? Because Trump has said, kill it. It's better for me politically if you kill this deal, and I will happily take the blame for it. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record an article titled GOP Senator, it is, open quote, immoral, close quote, to kill the border deal to help Trump.
Objections ordered.
It is striking what's in this. Senator Tom Tillis, who we pointed out is Republican, says, it is immoral for me to think you look the other way because you think this is a linchpin for President Trump to win. Strong words. Senator Mitt Romney called the effort to kill the bill, open quote, appalling. He noted that there is an issue at the southern border and needs to be fixed. We had Senator Todd Young calling the efforts to disrupt the negotiations as tragic. Senator Tillis again saying it would take courage for members to actually move ahead and get this done. Courage. Courage. What we keep hearing in this Rules Committee and in this Republican-controlled House is outrage. Talk about things that then don't get fixed by the bills before us, but sadly not courage. What I think it would take courage to do is if in these bills we actually did something that made a difference. I see Representative Garcia, who is going to testify about the need to have an amendment to these bills so we could have the Dream and Promise Act. That would take courage to actually do something that Americans want us to do, which is make sure that deferred action for children actually happens so that we could reap the economic benefits that these children are providing to our country, recognizing the economic benefits that dreamers bring to us, which would be actually courage to do something right and do something that's consistent with what American people need and is so needed by our economy and is, instead of being immoral, the morally right thing to do. I don't know, Ranking Member, if you have any further thoughts about this or wanted to answer any of the other issues that have been raised.
No, I think we've gone through much of it. We're dealing with messaging bills. with hypocrisy, with a political party that doesn't want to solve the problem because it wants the problem for the general election, although various Republican senators, that's not a fair description of them, but it's certainly a fair description of our former president and apparently of the House Republicans. There's not much else that can be said. The specifics of these bills I've already criticized, but the specifics are almost unimportant because we know these bills are going nowhere and are intended to go nowhere.
But more importantly, they actually don't fix the problem that the larger issues that have been raised today in bold headlines like this is happening, but none of these bills actually do that. And so that's the thing, is that we need to have the kind of courage to recognize that we need to fix the system, to recognize also the economic benefits that would come to us if we fix the system. We need to do, as my colleague mentioned, go in and invest in the countries where we're sending migrants up here, because until we do that, we have to stop the flow. We need to help people stay where they would prefer to stay, which is in their home country. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair thanks the gentlelady. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Representative McClintock, you visited our southern border and you've seen firsthand the systematic way that the cartels have managed the trafficking of illegal aliens across our border. Is there a feeling among those crossing our borders illegally that there is little standing in their way to prevent any of them from breaking our laws?
Well, of course not. All they need to do is flag down a Border Patrol officer, and they are guaranteed admittance into the country, free snacks, free food, free medical care, a ticket anywhere in the country that they want to go. Within 6 months, they're guaranteed a work permit, and they know that when their phony asylum claim is heard many, many years in the future, if they happen to show up for it and it's rejected, and they're ordered deported, that deportation order will not be enforced under this administration. You know, I was listening to Ms. Leisure-Fernandez ask, well, we should be putting more and more money as the president requests into it. You know, we were down at the Yuma border last year and met with a large group of Border Patrol officers. You know what they told us? For God's sake, don't send more money to this administration because they will simply use it to process people into the country even faster. That's a deliberate policy of this administration, and that's a question, as I said earlier, that can only be answered by the American people. Now, the Democrats keep criticizing this is the least productive session. We just talk and talk and talk about this crisis. We waste time talking about this crisis. We pass bills out of the House, well-structured, well-considered bills that will strengthen the hand of a president who wishes to enforce the laws, obviously not this one, but then fall short in the Senate. So why do we even try? Now, I want you to contrast that to the last 2 years that the Democrats controlled this House, and this mass migration, this mass illegal migration was unleashed by their policies. I was ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee then. Not a single hearing on the crisis, not a single hearing on the tragedy of the border. We had lots of hearings on how to admit more people into the country. Not a single hearing, not a word from the Democrats to defend our country's borders as they unleashed this onslaught against the people of our nation. And ultimately, the people of our nation are going to have to respond.
Yeah. Representative McClintock, is there any concern among those that are crossing illegally that their asylum case might be thrown out or they'll be deported back to their country of origin?
Well, again, they know that the odds are very much in favor that they will be able to stay here indefinitely, just as a practical matter. Many of them don't show up for their court dates. In fact, many of them are only given a notice to report rather than a notice to appear, meaning they're released on their own recognizance. They can then, by the way, use these documents, which amount to arrest warrants, for proof of identity on any plane in this country. This is ludicrous, and the American people are starting to awaken to the dangers that it poses. But they know this, and the statistics back them up. And all they await is another amnesty, like the one that is rumored to be considered in the Senate right now, so that will become permanent. Why are they coming? Because they know they'll be admitted and they know they can stay, and that's got to change.
Thank you, Representative McClintock. And finally, our friends across the aisle have spoken at length about how the fraud committed by illegal immigrants using stolen or, quote, shared Social Security numbers has actually had a benefit of funding critical safety net programs like Social Security and Medicare. To quote Representative Pramila Jayapal in 2018, such illicit activity actually, quote, keeps the Social Security system afloat. Is Social Security truly being kept afloat by the theft of Social Security numbers and other personal information by illegal aliens?
Well, no, and more to the point, we just received testimony in the Immigration Subcommittee the week before last that calculates that the average net cost, this is taxes paid minus services demanded, net cost is about $69,000 per immigrant. Now multiply that times the 5 million that have been allowed into this country under this administration's policies. It was just estimated that New York City schools will be paying $1 billion a year just to educate the illegal immigrants who have been brought as minors into this country this past year. Now that's the same as a $1 billion cut to the New York City schools. Now you multiply that by every school in the country, every homeless shelter, every public hospital, and you begin to see the enormous damage that this is doing to our country. And they not only don't care, they're actively promoting it. I have said to folks who've wondered aloud, how could this be happening to our country? Well, the answer is pretty simple. If you voted for the Democrats, this is exactly what you voted for. And if you're surprised by that, you weren't paying any attention, because this is exactly what they promised to do. This is exactly what they have done. And this is exactly what they have defended every single day in this Congress for the last 3 years. And Exhibit A is my good friend from New York.
Well, thank you, and I would like to echo those words to say that I find it insulting to our seniors, and any member of Congress would excuse away blatant crimes against American citizens as somehow helpful to the fiscal future of these programs. I greatly appreciate the work that the House Judiciary Committee has done to bring forward what I believe are targeted fixes to strengthen penalties and deter illegal immigration in those trafficking people across our borders. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Chair thanks the gentleman. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I thank my friend from Texas. I thank the witnesses for being here. I don't want to cover stuff that's already been covered, and I apologize for flight getting here as fast as I could. But I think, Mr. McClintock, a question for you about the 4 bills that are before us. We're dealing here with respect to all 4 of them with individuals who are present in the United States by virtue of having come here without papers. Is that correct? No? What is the classification of people in all 4 bills of the people we're dealing with here?
It applies to both legal and illegal immigrants in many of the bills. And just very simple reasoning, and that is, if you're a guest in this country, we ask that you obey our laws. And if you are not going to obey our laws, we need to show you the door.
We're dealing with non-citizens in all 4?
Correct.
Are we dealing with LPRs in each or all of the 4?
Yeah.
Legal permanent residents?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
But they've been given that status by virtue of our efforts as a country to say you can come here.
They are guests in this country.
Provided that you would follow the laws of this country, correct? Are the people that we're dealing with here with respect to all 4 of these bills, however, in significant numbers, we're dealing with a lot of people who are here illegally?
Of course,
Here,
well, especially, for example, at the border chases that are imperiling lives and killing law enforcement officers.
And in most cases, with respect to Social Security fraud.
Oh, yes.
Right, by definition.
Yeah, exactly.
So to be clear for the people watching at home, we are moving legislation to try to deal with, in some cases, legal permanent residents or people who are here who have been given legal status by virtue of our desire to be here, but in many cases, dealing with people who are here illegally.
As a practical matter, though, we need to make the distinction of the legal immigrant who's come here and obeyed all of our laws is an exemplary citizen. You'll find that they commit far fewer crimes per capita than American citizens do. These are the folks who have obeyed all of our laws. The Democrats love to compare them and confuse them with illegal immigrants whose very first act entering this country is a misdemeanor, a federal crime. And so it shouldn't surprise us that, as a practical matter, these laws will apply overwhelmingly to those illegally in this country who have already demonstrated a disdain and disrespect for our laws.
But to put a finer point on it for the people back home watching this, we're talking about individuals who have been given a status to be in the United States, who have then carried out some action that we believe would require either deportation, inadmissibility, whatever is in the particular statute that we're proposing, or in the lion's share of the numbers, we're talking about people who came here evading our laws, ignoring our laws to come here, whether it's across the Rio Grande or otherwise, overstaying your visas, right? You came here, violated our laws, overstayed your visas, whatever it is. And you have, in this one case, committed Social Security fraud. In another case, whether you're here with legal status or came here illegally, you're engaged in support or otherwise engaged with helping Hamas in this one particular instance. Or perhaps you have been convicted of DUIs and obviously engaging in high-speed chases with respect to the danger posed to Border Patrol and otherwise. So again, just for clarification, this is what we're talking about here. When the average, I'll finish this, then I'll leave it open for the question. When the average person that I represent, if I ask the average person that I represent in the 21st District of Texas, in Central Texas, do you think that any of the individuals, any one individual who came here in violation of our laws, whether they felt they had a reasonable claim to some coverage for asylum or some basis for parole or anything else, but they came here, most people in my district, I don't know how your people in your district feel, would say that individual should be removed immediately. That individual should not be present in the United States at all. But here we're talking about, at least for that class of individuals, we're talking about, again, consequences for Social Security frauds. In other words, we're layering on something on top of that which most average Americans would say we should be removing, deporting, not having them in the United States at all. And then we're coming in and saying on top of that, oh, by the way, I mean, if you commit Social Security fraud, you really shouldn't be here. I mean, I'm just trying to put in perspective kind of the absurdity of the spectrum on which we find ourselves.
Well,
I wonder if the gentleman might comment.
Well, it's pretty simple, actually. These bills are applying to drunk drivers, ID thieves, Hamas operatives, exactly the same provisions that we already apply for visa overstays, violating of non-immigrant status or condition of entry, smuggling aliens, committing marriage fraud, being a drug user or a drug addict, falsely claiming U.S. citizenship, engaging in espionage. We're simply applying the same provisions that apply to aliens who have violated those laws to drunk drivers, ID thieves, and terrorists. I don't think that's too much to ask, but the Democrats do, and that tells us a great deal about the attitudes of the parties on this issue.
So we've got 4 bills here, high-speed chases with respect to Border Patrol agents, protecting ourselves from DUIs, i.e. people who are committing acts of driving under influence or have committed such an act, engaging in Social Security fraud, a fairly significant problem for people if you take someone's identity and steal their hardworking contributions to Social Security, and then no benefits, i.e. you shouldn't be here if you're, I don't know, cavorting with terrorists like Hamas who endanger the American people and endanger our friends in Israel. So that's the position that we're laying forward in these 4 measures. Is that correct? I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back. Chair, thanks the gentleman. Are there any other members that have questions for this panel? If not, thank you very much for appearing before us today, and the witnesses are excused.
Jerry? Always a pleasure, it truly is.
The chair would invite to the witness table Representative Garcia and Representative Jackson Lee for amendments. Very well. Welcome to the Rules Committee. We will take testimony on all of the amendments that you have to offer, and then we may have questions afterwards. So, Ms. Jackson Lee, in seniority, let's start with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me start off by indicating that the amendment that I have is on H.R. 5585. And let me thank the Rules Committee for your courtesies throughout the year for listening to the concerns of members to make legislation better. And that is the intent that we have today, is to make legislation better and to, in fact, realize that with all the discussions that I heard as I was listening here, we would do well to have collaborative work, just as they're doing in the United States Senate, to produce a bill that should draw the support of all of us who are supportive of Americans. I wanted to bring up the title of a bill filed I'll do that as I filed, that was the Save America Comprehensive Immigration Bill, filed in 2007. I filed it and have been filing this bill repeatedly. And the concept that I want to focus on, Mr. Chairman, is that it mentions comprehensive. And that is what we have in these series of bills. It is not a comprehensive approach. It is piece by piece. And you will see us try to make amends for things that we have agreed to as Republicans and Democrats. But I want to go back to what I wanted to start with, which is to offer my deepest sympathy, again, to the family of Border Patrol agent Raul Gonzalez, a Texan, for his loss, the loss of his life in the line of duty. I want to clearly make that known to all of us, that we mourn for his passing and we recognize the service of all of them. But as we go back to trying to make a difference in this country, we would make a difference by doing it comprehensively and listening to people who, one, are in states on the border who have a different and real perspective, and also have been engaged in this process for a long time. So Chairman Cole, Ranking Member McGovern, and members of the committee, thank you again for this opportunity to speak in support of my amendment to H.R. 5585. My amendment would make three changes. First, my amendment makes a technical change to mirror language that appears in existing federal criminal statute. I'm not reinventing the wheel, which prohibits the commission of various offenses such as assault, murder, and manslaughter perpetrated against officers and employees of the United States and foreign officials while engaged in the performance of their official duties. As currently written, H.R. 5585 would require that the government prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the pursuing Border Patrol agent had the legal authority to engage in the underlying pursuit. In other words, the fact finder would have to determine whether the agent was abiding by laws and regulations in effect at the time of the pursuit. I want to make it better and indicate simply that it was in the performance of his or her official duties. In other words, we wouldn't have that extra burden. My amendment would simply require that the government prove that the Border Patrol agent was within their duties, meaning within the scope of the agent's employment. Second, my amendment would eliminate the minimum mandatory penalties in the bill, which, while maintaining the maximum penalties. To make it very clear, Republicans and Democrats over the years have supported the removing of mandatory minimums. We have had a whole contingent of evangelicals who stood alongside of us and said that mandatory minimums did not fit the four corners of the law or the penalties that should be rendered. Like many of my colleagues, I have opposed mandatory minimum penalties, particularly because of the devastating impact these sentencing schemes have inflicted on many Americans, including those who are communities of color. But I think the singular point to know is that it has been people from both parties over the years. And why are we separating now? Mandatory minimum sentences contributed to the mass incarceration of generations of Americans and are the primary reason that the United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. Mandatory minimums have been studied extensively and been found to distort rational sentencing systems, discriminate against minorities, waste billions of taxpayer dollars, and quite often violate common sense while failing to reduce crime. Brain trusts, like the Rand Commission, have concluded that mandatory minimum sentences are less effective than discretionary sentencing and far more costly. And so support comes from the Families Against Mandatory Minimums, supported also by evangelicals, the American Bar Association, the Judicial Conference of the United States, and many other organizations. And the Judicial Conference of the United States has reiterated to this body its opposition to mandatory minimum sentencing schemes more than a dozen times, noting these types of penalties severely distort and damage federal sentencing, undermine the U.S. sentencing guidelines mandated by this very Congress to promote fairness and proportionality in federal sentencing and destroy equity and honesty in sentencing, and encouraging coercive charging practices. Finally, my amendment would add an additional data point to the annual report: the immigration status of individuals charged with an offense under the new code section. In the end, the changes proposed in my amendment are narrowly tailored to address glaring deficiencies and do not change the overall mission of this bill. This is when we work together. My amendment considers the many criticisms of mandatory minimum penalties while allowing a judge's discretion to impose informed sentencing to satisfy the purposes and goals of federal sentencing. So I thank the committee again for the opportunity to testify, but more importantly, to present, I think, very instructive changes to this legislation and changes that have been expressed by Republicans and Democrats over the years in the criminal justice system. And I remind us collectively on the bills that we have before us that we are, in many instances, denying due process. And I don't know if we want to pass bills out of the United States Congress that denies due process, even in the immigration footprint. So let me thank you, and I yield back. Thank you.
Representative Garcia, you're recognized for your amendment.
It's coming soon, the hilarious Liar Liar, starring a man who is obsessed with Hunter Biden's hard drive, the deep state, talking sheer shite to Hannity on Fox Entertainment. He lives to push his head right up the backside of former guy. Jim Jordan's past takes him down a corridor of lie, lie, lie. Coming soon, a movie with 0 stars. Try and miss it.